Welcome to How to Fix It. I'm John Avlon, and the purpose of this podcast is to focus on finding solutions to the problems we face, not simply fixating on the problems themselves. God knows we got enough of them right now, but particularly in the realm of geopolitics, where democracies have been in retreat, autocracies have been on the rise, and our competition with China, which had been a unifying bipartisan policy, has suddenly, under the second Trump administration, had a few very odd concessions that could have geostrategic implications for this entire century. And joining us to talk about it is my dear friend, Matt Pottinger. Now, full disclosure, he and I have been friends since high school. We were in a band together. You can look it up. But more importantly, he was the longest serving deputy national security advisor in Trump's first term. He is a journalist turned Marine turned Trump deputy national security advisor. He was also the highest ranking White House official to resign on January 6th. But Matt also gets a lot of justified credit for being, I think, the person who most forged a new bipartisan consensus about the threat of China and how a lot of our engagement strategies had not been working. And that's why so much today, from TikTok to the H20 chips to China's use of AI for propaganda purposes, is urgent. And Matt is exactly the right person to talk to about how to fix it. Matt, good to see you, my brother.
Hey, it's great to be with you. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's been a week or two since we saw each other, and it's always a pleasure. You're going to get a lot of weirdness in this conversation, in addition to the substance, and I mean that in the best possible way.
Weird is good. Weird can be good.
Weird can be good. Exactly. Look, let's start with TikTok, because that is something that you worked on, something that a Republican Congress passed, and that Trump absolutely overturned a 9-0 Supreme Court decision and a Republican law the day before he took office. And it seems to have been normalized in ways that seem pretty dangerous for, the ability for the U.S. to have civic debates without foreign interference. Yeah. What's your take on the state of play with TikTok?
President Trump should go back to his original instinct, which was to ban TikTok if TikTok could not be transferred to U.S. control. I think he was persuaded by people close to him on the campaign that TikTok as a propaganda platform, more than an organic actual expression of social media, it's something that is easy to manipulate, is regulated by the Chinese Communist Party. The parent company ByteDance actually has two Communist Party secretaries in the company. Did when I did some research into this just a couple of years ago. And in fact, the Communist Party secretary of the company, appointed by the communist regime, was also the editor-in-chief of ByteDance and all of its platforms. Remember, ByteDance runs TikTok. The deputy party secretary, Communist Party secretary, is the deputy editor of content for ByteDance. Okay. So there's a reason why when people have compared how content trends on TikTok, when they've compared it to other platforms, it's actually exactly the same for neutral issues. If you're trying to figure out how popular is Taylor Swift on TikTok versus on X or on Instagram or Reels and other things, it's about the same. But then when you get to things that the Chinese Communist Party really cares about, which are not the things that people in a free society would want to see, it skews the virality, right? So that there certain things become hyper viral compared to other platforms, and other things are completely suppressed so that you can almost find no trace of them. So what we've ended up with is government control of speech in America, really for the first time since the First Amendment was adopted. Now, is it the U.S. government that's controlling the speech? I would argue indirectly, yes. And that is because the U.S. Congress, overwhelmingly bipartisan decision, was reached and signed into law last year to require the transfer of control. And by control, it doesn't just mean the ownership, but the actual control of the algorithms, which are right now obscure. They're in Beijing. They are manipulated in ways that we don't, fully understand, but which have profound implications for a free society. I would argue that you do have a First Amendment violation now because the U.S. government, the executive branch, the president, has decided to ignore the law, which was upheld in a 9-0 vote by the Supreme Court this law.
Which never happens, obviously.
I know, it's like 9-0 that this is a legitimate thing to do, that there's plenty of precedent, that we don't want government, foreign control of the public square in the United States. But the president, by ignoring that law and rescuing TikTok, while it still is under Chinese control, still under Chinese regulation, those algorithms are still hidden in a company in Beijing, that the U.S. government is in effect violating our First Amendment rights by knowingly outsourcing to a foreign government control of our speech. Our speech is now manipulated daily. What you see and what you don't see is decided by the Chinese Communist Party to a alarming extent.
And so this is extraordinary because it's disproportionately young people who get their news from TikTok. So this helps explain some of the gaps in opinion, right? After October 7th, the conversation was weighted heavily away from the Israelis. This is documented. Even in the context of last year's congressional campaigns, a lot of young people would disproportionately say, I don't think voting matters. I think democracy doesn't matter. There's no difference between the two parties, right? You can see that authoritarian drumbeat of trying to degrade the value of democracy. So what's likely to happen next? Because Trump keeps floating a possible sale. And what can we do to fix it? Because, apparently Trump's just insisting on flouting the law. So how do we fix this?
Well, look, so President Trump is trying to transfer the ownership, or at least a majority of the ownership, to Americans. That deal that he's teed up has not yet been publicly reported who all's in there, but it's a group of private equity firms and friends of the president, and reportedly Oracle has sort of a central role in bringing in a possible deal. The problem is, from what I'm hearing, there's no evidence that the algorithm itself will be any less controllable, or that the opportunity for interference in that algorithm will remain in Beijing's hands. So, and by the way, there's a reason why the deal hasn't been done yet. It's because the deal can't be done unless Xi Jinping agrees to do the deal. And right now, Xi Jinping has got to be pretty comfortable with his position. President Trump, every 75 days, President Trump essentially flouts U.S. law to sustain the algorithm, to sustain TikTok in the United States, still under the status quo of Chinese supervision of the app. And so, Xi Jinping's in no hurry to cut a deal, because he gets to manipulate U.S. public opinion as long as the law is violated here in the United States.
And if Beijing keeps the back end, they'll continue to have a hand in it, right? So, in order to meet the letter of the law, Beijing would have to give up the back end control. And there's a real danger that even in the event of a sale, that could still be put in place. And what's the recourse there? What's the recourse then?
Well, it would be a lawsuit. Someone needs to sue the White House, sue the executive branch for violating U.S. law. And the people who could do that, of course, anyone who has standing to sue would include members of Congress. I don't know why Democrats don't do that, but it would be better if it was bipartisan. We live in an era now of propaganda where people don't follow the media. The media as a actual third party medium is no longer nearly as powerful as it was. People are hearing directly from their leaders through the megaphone of social media. So right now, members of Congress are scared. Members of the Republican Party are scared, even to sue to uphold their own law, because they're worried about getting primaried. And so maybe it should be someone who is planning to leave Congress anyway, who should file suit. But this is in my view, and I wrote this in an amicus brief, or amicus brief, depending on how you like to pronounce it. You say amicus, I say amicus.
The bigger grammatical dick about it. Yes, go on.
My wife and I argue about this because we have nothing better to do. But in an amicus brief, I did file late last year, but as the Supreme Court was considering this case, I wrote that this is that TikTok in its current form is a violation of our First Amendment rights. And our government, by keeping it alive in violation of U.S. law, is violating our First Amendment rights.
And flouting a 9-0 Supreme Court decision. So presumably the Supreme Court would be amenable to that kind of suit. And that's where people got to suit up, right? And it's just a reminder of how the current polarization, hyperpartisanship, the primary system is making cowards out of people to do the right thing for our system of government.
And as usual, I think that President Trump, if he took the time to explore these arguments, as opposed to just listening to a few friends who are really representing TikTok's interests and representing the potential money interests that would benefit from a sale, even a sale that violates U.S. law because it still leaves the algorithm under Chinese control. I think that if President Trump really heard out these arguments, he might be persuaded to go back to his original instinct.
I mean, certainly he switched it after getting a campaign donation from an American on the board of ByteDance did a 180. You have more experience with him than I do. I have a lot less faith that he'd listen to reason. But let's talk about another Trump flip-flop that has huge implications. The biggest thing happening in the world right now is the AI revolution that people can start to see coming. They're utilizing it, but the total transformation it's going to wreak is still hard to comprehend while you're going about your daily life. And it's the competition between great powers. And the U.S. has a slight advantage, or has had a slight advantage, I think, which is fitting for a free society that encourages innovation. But, this has always been the autocratic argument, right? We can be more efficient, take big swings, do great things, the 5-year plans and all that bullshit. But the U.S. had a sanction in place for some of the chips that China needed to get ahead. These are called H20 chips. And suddenly, and without much fanfare, the Trump administration reversed its own course on this. Which I know you and other folks believe could have catastrophic effects for the U.S.'s ability to outpace China in the AI revolution. Explain what happened and then what we can do to fix it.
You picked a good one. After TikTok, this is the other major mistake of President Trump's second term. When you're talking about artificial intelligence and this race, the ingredients for creating artificial intelligence are data, massive quantities of data, basically everything that's ever been collected on the internet, or big chunks of that data set. Engineers and, software engineers and people who have taken artificial intelligence from theory, in the 1960s and 70s and leaped ahead to actually making it a reality. And then it's computing power. Those are that is sort of the trinity, right, that allows you to get there. The United States enjoys an advantage over the rest of the world, including China, really in one of those areas, and that is the computing power. Right? China has access to data. They steal our data. They get access. Right. They get access to open source data. Their own people have no privacy rights. So everything that anyone's ever breathed into their phone or typed in to any digital device in China is available to the Chinese government and anyone the Chinese government wants to see that data, including some of its large language model developers. So if you go back to President Trump's first term, he made a very good decision in 2020 to begin restricting China's access to computing power, namely semiconductors that could be used to do, at the time, 5th generation telecommunications. So the Chinese favored champion in this area is called Huawei. It started out as a telecommunications giant. Now it is really their AI and digital giant writ large. And so President Trump, by withholding those chips, slowed down Huawei's progress. And it's recovering. You know, export controls are never a permanent solution, right? But they do help slow things down. And when every year counts, and according to people that you and I know who've been telling us about AI, every month counts, right? I mean, you're seeing really important. So like the difference between having a 1-year lead, even a 6-month lead, is really quite important.
Huge.
So the Biden administration, picked up where President Trump had left off and actually deepened the export controls so that not only was Huawei unable to get high-end semiconductors, but really they broadened that to make it much harder for China's industry as a whole to gain access to those advanced semiconductors. It also made it harder for China to import the equipment it would need to make its own advanced semiconductors. And this isn't like rare earths, right? We're feeling pain because China's choking off our access to rare earths. Well, guess what? We're going to find a way to recover from that because rare earths are not really that rare. They're a commodity. We'll have to build up, some processing facilities. We'll have to figure out how to build the magnets, out of rare earths that we need for the electric vehicle sector and for the military sector. We can fix that. It'll take a couple of years. China cannot fix the fact that it doesn't have Dutch-made ASML extreme UV light etching machines, lithography machines for making the most advanced chips. These are the most complicated pieces of equipment ever devised by human beings. You know, it's decades of sort of experience piled upon, compounded until they've created something that you can't just dig out of the ground like rare earths. So Beijing has a real disadvantage in compute. Now, President Trump in April picked up where Biden had picked up from Trump himself and deepened those export controls even further by cutting off Beijing's access to a chip made by NVIDIA Corp. Remember, NVIDIA is an American-based company made by a Taiwan-born, a Chinese-American, Taiwan-American guy, Jensen Huang. But the chips are all made in Taiwan. So President Trump cut off China's ability to access the so-called NVIDIA H20 chip. Now, when people say this isn't the most advanced NVIDIA chip, they're not wrong. There are more powerful chips, but the H20, it turns out, is much more powerful than people recognized when it was first created. And that's because it's particularly well suited to helping AI models with their own reasoning. Basically, how do you make an AI model more efficient with the data it already has? So whereas there are more advanced chips that allow you to build bigger and bigger models through the sort of brute force computing to make a system more advanced that way, the H20 is very good at allowing existing models to become much more energy efficient, much faster, better reasoning. And that's exactly how this company that no one had heard of until January, called DeepSeek, a Chinese AI company, suddenly leapt onto the international scene. It turns out that it was performing as well as some of the much more powerful AI models because they figured out how to improve what's called inference. It's inference modeling. So for a form of reasoning, better reasoning with the data that they have. So the H20 is exactly what the Chinese companies are looking for. In fact, the head of DeepSeek said the biggest problem he faces in leapfrogging US models is he doesn't have access to enough chips from NVIDIA. And so President Trump banned China's access to that chip in April. And then he was persuaded by Jensen Huang himself, the NVIDIA head, as well as a couple of Trump's advisors, to reverse that decision and start exporting this chip that China needs to overtake US AI.
So I know that's why that's in NVIDIA's interest, right?
Sure.
And generally, I'm a free trade guy, but not when it comes to national security and geostrategy. And so why is it in the United States' interest to flip this? I mean, how was he persuaded?
We don't know exactly what happened in that conversation. I think it took place on Air Force One. Look, first of all, there is no NSC anymore, right? The National Security Advisor normally, there is no National Security Advisor now. Mike Waltz was sent. He's going to be moving up to New York to be our UN. Yeah. And Marco Rubio is in the acting role, and he's spending part of his day at the White House, but he's also, he has to travel for the president as the Secretary of State. So it's not clear to me that there was anyone in the room who was informed enough and had the prerogative to advance the U.S. national security interest as opposed to NVIDIA's economic interest. And so I think that if I had to speculate, I would guess that Jensen Huang would have said, look, this will be, $20 billion in exports. I've already made the chips. They're sitting in stockpile. He's got something like 700,000 chips, according to one estimate. And so, President Trump might have been persuaded by the idea of, oh, these are exports, even though the things are made in Taiwan, but what we're exporting, if we're exporting for $20 billion and NVIDIA's bottom line, basically, China's victory in the AI race so that we become, a second tier power, then that's probably not a pretty good deal for the United States. And I think that's where we're at. It's worse than you think, though, in this sense. It turns out, the company that makes all these chips for NVIDIA is called TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corp. This was the company that won the race, to be the most effective, semiconductor chip maker. And while, President Trump and others have said, well, Taiwan stole our industry. It's true that Taiwan early on had very significant sort of, tax incentives and other subsidies to encourage chip manufacturing there. The fact is that TSMC recreated the whole model. They innovated a better model for how to make chips. It was this, where they would basically become a contract fab. So people would design the best chips in the world, and they trusted TSMC to be able to make them for them, and they would compartment the information so that people's IP was protected. It turned out that they learned how to make chips better because they were dealing with every chip designer in the world. That's and right. So TSMC makes these chips. Now, when Jensen Huang at NVIDIA is making hundreds of thousands, if not millions of chips for China now going forward, that actually is a zero-sum prospect. TSMC has a limited amount of capacity that it can devote to making these so-called GPUs, graphical processing units, that turn out to be the chips that are most effective for training AI. So it means that all the U.S. companies will have to get in line behind China to get the chips they need to advance their own models. So this was a grave mistake by the president. I'm very hopeful that he will reverse this decision. He got sold a bill of goods by the people who talked him into this, and it could be I really think that this could be a fatal mistake.
Media's been constrained. Media capture is a problem, but the failure to focus on the important for the urgent. When Trump made this decision, it did not make the kind of waves. It did not get people's attention the way it should, given the stakes that you just laid out. And so that sort of leads to the normalization or the acceptance of dangerously bad decisions that really kind of tee up a Sputnik moment. So the only way to fix this one is for Trump to be persuaded. And I hate this whole, we just got to go kiss the ring and appeal to ego and get, that's the mechanism of policy in a democracy. But that's really the only hope right now. Unless Republicans start to speak up, and I know a few have. Is that right?
Well, look, I know that the China Select Committee and its chairman has written a letter to Howard Lutnick, who is President Trump's Commerce Secretary, raising significant concerns about this decision. I've seen similar concerns raised in fact, I signed a letter. I almost never sign these kinds of letters, but I was really so worried about the consequences of this decision that I signed a letter, bipartisan letter, that includes, people who care about U.S. national security, mix of Republicans and Democrats, American Compass, which is Oren Cass's outfit, which has been very effective at explaining President Trump's trade policies and why tariffs are actually something that can be a useful tool. His group signed on to this, or at least Orrin himself did. So several people who worked for President Trump in his first term signed it as well, including people who worked for him for part of his second term as well. So this is a good faith effort to try to appeal to the president that he has been sold a bill of goods. And by the way, I think it's worth saying here, I don't represent, just because there's so much propaganda going around, I don't represent any company or interest in this is a pure national security interest. No one's, I don't have anyone saying, hey,
there's no client. Yeah.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
This is just national security.
I run a research firm that just writes throughout the week about U.S.-China dynamics. I don't do any advocacy. Some of my clients are investors in NVIDIA, so that they probably are just from a pure financial perspective, they would like to see NVIDIA sell more chips, including to China. But I'm telling you, this is the worst mistake. Along the TikTok decision and this H20 decision are the two major mistakes of this administration, and there's still time to reverse both of them.
So you mentioned propaganda and the kind of disinformation, misinformation that's flowing through and distorting our abilities fundamentally to reason together, right?
Yeah.
That's the larger danger, is that we got to be in the business of defending American democracy, strengthening American democracy, which means dealing with new technological threats. Now, there's a new article out about China and AI-driven propaganda. And this is sort of, hot off the digital presses here, but break down for folks this emerging threat and how it's manifesting itself and what we can do to fight.
Yeah, you're referring to the piece about Golaxy. It's spelled Golaxy. It's a Chinese government created company that a cache of their documents was obtained by Vanderbilt University and a couple of very smart researchers there who wrote a piece today for the New York Times, explaining some of what they found. And, I'm looking forward to those documents eventually being made, available so people can dive into them. But what you're looking at is, essentially, Chinese Communist Party backed efforts to control the discourse in democracies. Hong Kong, which had been promised a high degree of autonomy until it wasn't by the Chinese Communist Party.
Are you saying that we can't trust the word of the Chinese Communist Party?
Oh dear. Yeah.
Go on.
Not quite.
Yeah.
And so Hong Kong had free speech until recently. Taiwan still enjoys free speech and in fact is one of the freest democracies in the world. It's rated, repeatedly the freest society in Asia, the most successful democracy in Asia, and it rates above the United States on a lot of democracy measures, right? They are now the laboratory experiment. They are the lab rat for Chinese government efforts to control the discourse in a free society by weaponizing free speech to infiltrate with extremely advanced forms of AI generated propaganda, and it is covert. It is designed to look as though it's organic, that it's coming from real people. Many times it's completely invented. We're used to already this idea of bots and so forth. This is much more advanced than that, because China has managed to ingest massive amounts of data about each one of us individually. Everyone who's used TikTok and other platforms like Red Note, which is another Chinese.
This was the TikTok alternative that was like a direct reference to Little Red Book. I mean,
it's called Little Red Book, which is refers to the Cultural Revolution and Mao Zedong's sayings. In Chinese, it's called Little Red Book, but they call it Red Note in English. And so these things have taken off in Taiwan, just like TikTok has taken off in the United States. And so Golaxy is trying to ride that wave, according to their own documents that were analyzed by Vanderbilt, in order to find ways to individually tailor to each human being, because they know what people's personal values are, what their personal political interests, their sex preferences, their, everything that they know about these people based on what you've been reading and looking at. And then they will tailor messages through very sympathetic, very organic looking content that is designed eventually to peel you away from democracy, peel you away from your fellow citizens, polarize the society, make China's model, a totalitarian communist dictatorship, look like it's doing great and is exactly what, that socialism as practiced by a single party state is really maybe the answer we've been looking for all along. Don't mind the 20th century. Don't look there. Don't look at human history.
Ignore history. Rewrite history.
Look forward to, us reselling the idea that you don't really want human agency. You don't want human freedom. You want everything to be decided for you by Big Brother. And so we are now in 1984. We are in Brave New World. We are now walking into the dystopia that we read about, the warnings that Huxley and Orwell and others wrote about. And we're doing it with a smile on our faces because it all seems like it's so natural. It's all been tailored for us, on our TikTok feeds.
This could not obviously be more dangerous, but also part of the sale that's different, right? Because the totalitarian regimes have always degraded the idea of individualism, individual agency, right? It's that they've played on greed, right? There's this promise with wealth without liberty. We'll liberate you from decision making and you'll get rich and you'll be comfortable. Just give up your freedom. Just give up your agency. And the way they're trying to intentionally distract and polarize us is so dangerous. And this is a sign of coming attractions, right? I mean, this is personalized propaganda, that we're all going to be pawns in unless we push back.
Yeah. So keep your eye on that story. It was in the New York Times op-ed page today, by Brett Goldstein. It is going to, I think there'll be more that's going to be coming out about this, in days and weeks ahead.
One of the things that I think is so, surreal, but we need to keep our eye on the ball in this administration is that you have a bunch of folks who I think could be called neo-isolationists, non-interventionists is what they like to style themselves. But their reason for withdrawing or trying to go soft on Vladimir Putin or whatever it may be, a lot of time they've used the fig leaf of saying that's so we can focus on the threat of China, right? That's been the kind of jingoistic, let's focus on this threat. Therefore, downplay all the other authoritarian power grabs. But this administration seems to be in the things you just laid out, far less tough and consistent when it comes to China. We keep trying to, by withdrawing from parts of the world, we open those up to Chinese influence. When we got clean energy innovation, we cede that technological ground to China. There are yellow lights around Taiwan. In addition to the flip-flops on TikTok and the H20. What's going on with this sort of tough rhetoric, but the reality is they seem to be empowering the people they say they're opposing.
I saw a news report this morning reporting that a recent poll shows that Americans' views of the People's Republic of China are improving. So I wouldn't be surprised if that is a TikTok effect. That it is propaganda. That poll, I believe it was by a group called Third Way, who I'm not familiar with. But
I am. They're a solid centrist think tank out of DC.
So they were it was Semaphore that wrote the report today about this, showing that people's views of the People's Republic of China are improving. And this is at a moment when China is accelerating its support for the largest war in Europe since World War II. The foreign minister of China, maybe in an unguarded moment, just admitted to Europe's top diplomat that China wants to see Russia win this war because it distracts the United States. He actually said it. He said the quiet part out loud. I like it when that happens. Some rare honesty from the Chinese Communist Party. So China is the decisive enabler of the war in Europe. it is still flooding American communities with fentanyl and now with new drugs that are even more powerful than fentanyl. So as President Trump is working on trying to get China to back off providing all of these precursor chemicals to the drug cartels that are poisoning our citizens, China is now developing new molecules that are being laced into marijuana, and we've had hundreds of deaths of just kids smoking dope in the United States who are dying from yet another Chinese synthetic opioid. Basically the more that Beijing punishes America's national interest, the softer we get suddenly. So I think part of it is the propaganda effect. Part of it is that we're just distracted with too many things. And of course, social media, enhances that sense that there's just constant overload. People don't know what's important, what's not important. And so, we need good media again, and people who are good at curating what is on social media and on the web to help provide, like you said, centrist, smart analysis of what really does matter long term. And the competition with China is one of those things that really, really is going to matter, not just because of the AI and who wins that race. Look, I'm concerned about AI and the effect it's going to have on employment, all these things.
Sure.
That said, I'm also not a Luddite. I realize that this is the direction that innovation is taking us, and human beings are adaptable. We're going to have to figure out how to adapt to it, and we're going to benefit in a lot of ways from AI. The one thing I'm confident of is that I don't want AI to be dominated by a one-party, a single-party communist dictatorship, a Leninist dictatorship that has no regard for the rights and lives and interests of its own people. And for that to be the standard, and we're followers of that technology, that's going to be fatal for our democracy.
It would be fatal for our democracy. And it's why I think, liberal capitalist democracy implies evolution, putting guardrails, but the democracies need to be working together to stop this autocratic tide that's being enabled by AI and technology, and not be the victims of it. I mean, the stakes could not be any higher. So I want to talk about some macro solutions. Matt, when you were in the Marines, we should say you're a musician turned journalist, fascinating, life story. One of the funniest human beings I've ever met. But also that joined the Marines. And at Quantico, you had a phrase, that I loved, which was, your drill sergeants would say, "Marine, unfuck yourself." Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's, I love it. Yeah. That phrase, still comes to mind, both for myself, at various points in the day, but also for the country writ large. I think we need a drill instructor telling us to un-F ourselves. So
that's true. I shamelessly borrowed it when I was on Bill Maher a few years ago, and I said, we need to unfuck America. This is the larger project, to start playing offense on this idea. And let's just talk about some of the ideas. You work for Donald Trump. I have been an unrelenting critic of Donald Trump. I'm a centrist Democrat. I think you're center right, for sure. But, as is often the case, there's a lot of common ground in the middle, and we care about a lot of the same things, and obviously have a deep personal friendship. So, let's talk about some of the things we think that can get us back on the right path. Some guardrails that can stop us from being consumed by this stuff. You gave a speech about social media. You called for something called civility mode and sewer mode, which are colloquial, but I kind of love it. Explain that to folks.
Yeah. So the idea is, I don't think that we want, social media companies, censoring and deciding what we say. Not just the Chinese Communist Party via Little Red Book and TikTok. I don't want Mark Zuckerberg to decide what goes on, but I do like the idea. I support the idea of a voluntary, setting that people can choose to opt into on any social media platform, that would, moderate out, attacks on, people's motives, attacks on their character, basically ad hominem attack. I'm a big believer. I don't like echo chambers, But the one thing I do like is really good debate. Okay. And that means that you're not attacking people's character. You're not attacking their motives. You're fighting their arguments, and you're trying to persuade people through better argument. I think that there might be a way to for people to opt into a civility mode where the best arguments, again, I don't want this to be left or right echo chambers. The opposite. I want this to be where there is the most rigorous debate and most interesting ideas, and stories and things that are being put forward, but where they tamp out the pure ad hominem invective that is it's always the first thing you see after someone posts something interesting.
Sure.
The first thing you see under it is usually an attack on that person's character, right? A lot of those are bots. Some of them are real people, but it basically, everything's designed to basically, disparage rather than actually argue. And one of the marks of a civil society, of civilization, frankly, is the ability to marshal arguments that are based on reason, and a little bit of emotion, sure, but emotion directed at the ideas, not
right.
attacking the people. So the idea would be that you could opt in, you can opt out anytime you want as well, but that it's like the mother of all APIs that is overlaid on every one of these platforms, that allows you to switch on a civility mode. And then if you want to go back into sewer mode, you just flick it off. You go back out.
You can go swim around that sewer all day long if you want.
Exactly. Don't mind the chunks at the surface. So keep your mouth closed.
It's a good idea. And look, I think we need to be engaging ideas. We need to be talking about ways to build guardrails consistent with our values. We need to be making sure that we aren't, that we aren't easily manipulated as a society, where our democracy consumes itself. And, the ancient Greeks and Romans and the founding fathers all warned about exactly the hyperpartisanship and polarization. They warned about the excessive debt. They warned against foreign wars and foreign interference in our domestic debates. It's all happening right now, but it's still very much within our power to fix it still. But if we don't, the trajectory of this century is going to be something that nobody wants, which is an authoritarian future.
For all 9 of you who are listening in, you heard it here
first.
More
than that. The good news is there is a growing awareness that people need to seek out places that are having a fact-based debate that's about principles over partisanship. Those are things that connect us. Those are things that we need to aspire to and build towards. And that's the real rebellious position. Remember, democracy is a rebellious action in the context of human history. So we got to keep, steeling our spine for the times ahead. Matt Pottinger, I love you, brother.
Hey, I love that you're doing this show, and this is our life's work is how to fix it. We've got the best system of government in spite of all of its flaws. This is as close as we've gotten to perfection, and it's about building a more perfect union. It is a constant effort. That's what the founding fathers understood, and so bless you for working in that spirit. And
we're going to keep doing it together, man.
Good.
All right. Be well.